Thanks for thinking of it.
You're welcome. All right, we are live with Bible Study Hub. Welcome on in and let us know that you're here. We'll pop up our question of the night. And the question of the night comes from Emily earlier. I modified it just a little bit, but it was a great
Emily was
question.
bored.
Stuck in a waiting room and nothing to do. So what was a staple in your diet growing up? Something that maybe was like that time period that you just felt like we don't really eat anymore, you haven't seen for a while, but something that you ate growing up that was kind of a staple in your diet. If you're watching later and you're not live with us, you might want to skip ahead about 5 minutes just to kind of, unless you're really, really interested in what everybody was eating as a child, in which case you're welcome to hang out. But if you would like to skip over this, you're welcome to do that as well.
Hi, Carolyn.
Carolyn is with us. Hi, Carolyn. This is great. So glad that you're with us from Arizona. Pop up Shirley here. She says, hi, everyone. Potatoes. I assume that's an answer to the question. I'm glad to have you, and I'm glad that you were able to eat potatoes as a kid growing up. It was a staple. I'll tell you, those will fill you up if you need to feed a crowd and you need to do it on the cheap. Potatoes, always a good idea.
I love it. Yeah, I'll take potato anyway.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
All potatoes I love.
Yeah,
I have a thing for potatoes as well. So come on in and let us know that you're here. And
peanut butter sandwiches.
Carolyn says that peanut butter sandwiches were a staple of her childhood growing up. I'm looking to see what kind of foods you ate a lot of. Peanut butter sandwiches, also a very good choice. What about you, Emily?
One of my favorites was my grandma. We're Italian, so my grandma would make what I think commonly is called gnocchis here.
Never heard of it.
It's like a potato-based pasta.
Oh.
We call them cavadillas. So they were so delicious, and my grandmother would make them. And when she put them in the refrigerator, and she lived at the beach, so we'd go out and party and everything, and everybody would want to get pizza and go out and eat. And I'd be like, I'm not hungry. And I would sneak go eat the cold cavadillas like at 2 a.m.
Oh, I love that story. That's a great story. Were they like pierogies?
I don't know what a pierogi is.
Oh,
I don't know.
I'm not sure either.
Maybe
Josh,
pierogi.
does Josh know what a pierogi is?
Yeah.
Josh is producing for us tonight. Thank you, Josh, for being here. So anyway.
Hi, Mary.
Mary's here. Hi, Mary. We're so glad to have you. And Dottie, she says, Bosco, a chocolate flavor for milk. I have seen Bosco before. Have you ever seen it?
I think I've heard of it. Yeah.
Okay. I think I think I've seen it in Arizona, but I'm not sure about that. But I know I have seen it. That's really interesting. So welcome on in, everybody. We'll get going right at 9 p.m. Eastern time here. While we're just gathering for a few minutes, let us know what was something that you ate as a child that maybe was a staple of your diet, something like that.
Yeah.
My mom used to make 7-layer Jell-O. So she would mix up like cherry Jell-O and pour it in a great big 9x13 cake pan, put it in the fridge level. And then she'd mix up the next flavor like lime or something, and she'd pull it out, and then she'd pour that on top. So then it would harden, but it didn't take very long. So by the time you were done, you had all these beautiful
Did she follow God's rainbow color-wise?
I don't think so.
No. Okay.
I don't know.
Maybe
she did.
Fruit-based.
Yeah. I wasn't sure. But yeah. So
pierogies are dumplings filled with mashed potatoes. It's a potato night.
Oh,
it's a potato night. Lots of different. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. Oh, I think that's from Josh. I'm like, wait, who wrote that? It's Bible Study Hub, and we're both here. That was kind of weird. Josh did that. Thank you.
Susie.
Yeah, so good to see Susie. Hi, Susie, to you. Let's see here. And Christ First Church is also letting us know that pierogies are dumpling filled with mashed potato.
Can you go wrong there?
No, anything filled with mashed potato. Anything with mashed potato is normally really good.
Yep.
All right. Well, it looks like a little bit of a lighter night tonight, but that's totally fine. It's summertime. Get one more here, and then let's see here. Oh, yeah. Thank you so much, Josh, for popping this up. So if you'd like to have your name attached to your comment, go to StreamYard.com/Facebook, give it permission, and your name will come up. One more. Roberta says, hi, everyone. Staple was hot dogs, I think. Oh, yeah, of course. Hot dogs.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I used to have to eat them. I didn't like them.
I went to Costco today, and in the place where people eat, the little cafeteria or
Yeah.
whatever.
Mhm.
Whole lines of people eating hot dogs.
Oh, okay.
Tons of people eating hot dogs.
It's summer.
There
Everybody
must be,
wants a
it's
hot
time
dog.
for hot dogs.
That's right. Well, we'll be back with you in 30 seconds and then we'll get rolling on Bible Study Hub. Welcome to Bible Study Hub. I'm Ann Wiggins, and I am joined tonight by my dear friend, Emily Scott. I'm so grateful that she has been willing to come back and help us for 3 weeks now, and what a difference it makes
Oh, thank you.
to have a second person.
Thank you so much.
Yeah,
Thank you.
grateful to have you. Well, we are in the book of John. We've been trekking along through chapter 1. We're actually making it to chapter 2 tonight, which we're grateful for. And it is a packed night. So I hope that you can stay with us the entire time and just absorb the wonder and amazement that we've been enjoying all week. And also just as we've been talking about it today, the Word of God and how mind-blowing it is. Tonight is going to be one of those nights. It's just going to be amazing. So tonight we're going to start out in chapter 2 with the wedding in Cana, where Jesus turns the water into wine. And I was telling Emily that over the course of the week, as I was studying and listening to various sermons and reading various commentaries, I was really intrigued by how many people pulled something out of this passage that I just kind of left me scratching my head. Like one commentator said, when they filled all those 6 jars up to the tippy top with water at Jesus's direction, he said, obviously, that was a foreshadow of the filling of the Holy Spirit. And I just thought, what? How did you come to that? You got to back that up. You can't just say it. There was no backing it up. He was pretty sure that that's what it was. I doubt it. People went crazy with the number 6 with the jars and how,
Oh, really?
the whole,
Yeah.
one short of God's perfect number. It's the number of man, and then tried to draw all these parallels.
Okay.
Things like that.
Mhm.
A whole sermon on a wedding
Mhm.
based on this passage. Does God value marriage? Of course he created it. Is it about a wedding? Yes, but it's not about a wedding. There's more there. So, and I say all this because I think it's easy, especially if you're kind of new to studying the Bible or reading the Bible, to kind of come to it with this idea of, oh, I don't know. You'd read something like, oh, it's obviously a foreshadow of the Holy Spirit's filling in. And you might say to yourself, I don't know. I can't understand it. I would never have pulled that out. God's not trying to hide anything in his word. He wants you to understand it. That's the whole point of it. So it's not a bunch of hidden secret meanings and ethereal things and metaphorical things going on. It's just very face value. And so last week we started with this, and I'm going to start with it again, and I'll probably keep doing this. John, the author, John, the apostle, tells us what the purpose is of the whole book at the end of his book. So since we have the whole thing, we can jump over to the end and talk about this. In verse 31 of chapter 20, he says, these have been written to you so that you may believe that Jesus is the Christ, or the Messiah, same thing, the Son of God, and that believing you may have life in his name. The whole purpose of everything in this book, all the miracles, all the signs, is to show you that your faith isn't just hung on some nebulous nothing, that you're not supposed to check your mind out of the game and just believe, don't ask questions. He's like, I'm giving you proof. I want you to see the signs, and I want you to see those signs and say, wow, only God could do those things. Jesus is God. Wow. Jesus fulfills everything that the Messiah was supposed to fulfill. That's the purpose of these stories. That's the purpose of the account of the miracles. So keep that in mind as we go through it. It's very easy to understand, and it's really, really face value. So let's jump in. John chapter 2, verses 1 to 11. I'm reading from the Legacy Standard Bible. I'm happy to read it. Do you want to read it?
You go ahead and
Want me
read.
to?
Yeah.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
It's on my screen a little easier. So it says this. And on the third day, there was a wedding in Cana of Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Notice her name isn't mentioned, just the mother of Jesus. That's kind of interesting. And both Jesus and his disciples were invited to the wedding. And when the wine ran out, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, what do I have to do with you? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servants, "Whatever he says to you, do it." Now, there were 6 stone water jars set there for the Jewish custom of purification, containing 2 or 3 measures each. Jesus said to them, "Fill the water jars with water." So they filled them up to the brim. And he said to them, "Draw out some now and take it to the head waiter." So they took it to him. Now, when the head waiter tasted the water which had become wine and did not know where it had come from, but the servants who had drawn the water knew, the head waiter called the bridegroom, and he said to him, "Every man serves the good wine first, and when the people have drunk freely, then the inferior wine. But you have kept the good wine until now." Jesus did this in Cana of Galilee as the beginning of his signs and manifested his glory, and his disciples believed in him. So the result was exactly what we just said a moment ago, that John's goal is for all of us, that the disciples did believe. So Emily, would you want to talk a little bit about just this time period and kind of why weddings were such an ordeal?
Well, weddings, people didn't have much back in the day. I mean, just survival. There were no grocery stores or anything like that. So a wedding was a big and special celebration. And were they engaged for a year? Was that?
They were engaged for a while,
Long
and their
time.
betrothal was
Yeah.
an actual like contract. Like they were legally married, but they didn't consummate until the wedding.
Till the
But
wedding.
yeah, it could go on for quite some time.
Yeah. So it was a really big deal. And I think, first of all, I pull out of this, the biggest life hack is always invite Jesus to your wedding.
Yeah.
Invite him to your birthday party, your anniversary, invite Jesus, and look, he shows up.
Oh, that's so
which is so
cool.
nice.
That's so
But
cool.
this was not scheduled in I don't think this was scheduled in Jesus's mind to be revealed at this point,
Okay.
because he says, I'll go back to my notes. What did we read the part?
Yeah.
My hour has not come.
Right.
Yet. Yes. So there was a need for wine. He ran out of wine, and Mary asked Jesus, and he's not quite ready to begin his miracles, but he's not going to deny his mother.
Yeah, isn't that something?
I love that. I love that.
The interchange between Mary and Jesus in this passage is really fascinating. It almost comes across as disrespectful in the English and our current culture. But I want you to rest assured there's nothing disrespectful going on. First of all, I mean, Mary is a Jewish mother. You know, they take care of you. This is one of the things that Jewish mothers are just known for. They're really good at. I did a little research into it. I don't know if I can find it in my notes, but I went to like the Urban Dictionary, and that's a crowdsourced, like just kind of a fun way of defining terms. And it basically just said, you know, she'll feed you, and she'll pester you, and she'll send you home with a bag of leftovers when you're done eating.
Unstoppable force.
That's right. Yes, an unstoppable force. We say this in the most glowing of terms. I hope that that's very clear right now. We're certainly not putting down our Jewish mothers out there at all. But Mary was a strong woman. You know, she wasn't a pushover. And so when she sees the wine is run out, which is a horrible thing to have happen, you how embarrassing, how shameful to not have prepared enough or not to have the resources to continue the party. She just says to Jesus, "They have no wine." You know, and if you're a mom, you know exactly what's going on here. She's like, she's giving him the eye. They have no wine. Like, do I have to ask, or do you just get it? and Jesus says, "Woman, what do I have to do with you?" When he says woman, it would be more like us saying, "Yes, ma'am," kind of. You know, it's not. It doesn't come across cold or disrespectful in that particular culture and language. And then when he says, what do I have to do with you? It was kind of just an expression, an idiom in that time. And it just was kind of like he said, "Ma'am, this is not for me," you know, and you can just kind of see. And And then her response is
Mhm.
so precious.
It's so precious because she tells the servants, do what he tells you.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think when you're in close relationship with somebody like a mother and son, you get the communication. I mean, you can probably
So
communicate to Lee
Mhm.
exactly in a look, right?
Oh yeah.
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 We all do that with our
Yeah.
husbands and our kids
Yeah, huh?
and all of that. I mean, because you're close knit.
Mhm.
But I think also her response was, do whatever he says was also a very respectful way of handling the situation because it left the door open for Jesus to say to the crew, go back to work. I can't help you with this one, And so she didn't say, hey, Jesus, go fix this. But he knew that she wanted him to. So back to the whole, when he said, my hour has not come.
Yeah. Mhm.
It's not time for him to launch his miracles yet. So you brought up something earlier about just the scope of this miracle and how it
Mhm.
wasn't for the masses.
It really wasn't for the masses. And, when he had the servants fill the vessels with water, he did nothing that we knew, that the audience knew. There was no waving of a wand.
Right.
There was no speaking. There were none of the things that, a magician might do. He simply said, fill it up, and he changed it to wine. The only ones that knew it were Mary, the disciples, and the servants.
Mhm.
So he was able to, Mary was really trying to save face for this family.
Yep.
And he obeyed his mother and he was able to do this. I'm sure he was in relation somehow with God
Oh yeah.
to make sure this was okay. But I consider this the unscheduled miracle.
I love when you
Yes.
said that.
Yes.
Susie is asking a question. She said, why did Jesus decide to make the wine after he stated his time had not arrived yet? And that's a great question, Susie. All we can do is kind of just read between the lines on this one and say, based on what you just talked about, it was he decided to go ahead and do it, but it was a very quiet, understated miracle. So the only people who knew that it had happened were Mary, obviously Jesus, because he did it, his disciples, and the servers.
Yeah.
So when they take it to the head waiter, he has no idea where this wine came from. And so it's not a public, so it's almost like Jesus consulted with God the Father, because we're told over and over in the Gospels, he says, I only do what the Father tells me to do. I only say what the Father tells me to say. So there must have been some prayer going on, and God said, do it like this, and it will be fine. So that's all I can tell you.
Yeah.
Do you have any other thoughts on that one?
Exactly.
So what he does here is not a party trick. It's not a sleight of hand. Somewhere in between the filling of those water jars all the way to the tippy top. And by the way, this is like 120 to 130 gallons of wine. It's a lot of wine. They would have these big, big pitchers. In fact, I took a little screenshot of something here. This is excavated from an archaeological dig, and this is probably very similar to what these water jars would have looked like. You can see they've kind of glued some of them back together. But they were for washing their hands, for washing utensils. The Jewish people were and are today very, very hygienic and very, very clean. And a lot of that is because God directed them to do that for their own protection. Of course, in a day when they didn't know about germs and things, they were already taking care of this. So when they filled these up to the top, somewhere between that and when the head waiter tasted it, something that can't ferment water becomes a fermented grape drink. Only God can do this. This is speaking into existence, not even speaking, it's willing.
Yeah, really.
In his mind. He didn't say a word. Like, I loved how you pointed out, he didn't do any theatrics. There was no waving of a magic wand or anything. He just says, fill it up. And by the time they scoop it out, it's wine.
Yeah.
This is the point of the miracle that John is saying to every one of us. Look what he did. Only God can do that. Nobody else can do that. It's a creative miracle.
And I love that he ends this passage is ended with, and the disciples believed in him.
Yes.
That's a beautiful ending.
Yes. Yeah. And it's the goal of what is going on. So this will be the last of his almost secretive sort of miracles. And then by next week, we'll be getting into some of his more public.
And Josh says, my mom both loves to throw parties and always sends me home with the leftovers. Mary has never been before so relatable. I love it.
Having just been at your house for a party last night, I will totally say he's right.
And I love that too. Susie says, I love that he did this for his mother. He did.
Yeah, he sure did. He sure did. But you notice that nobody twists his arm. Like Jesus is his own person, and he's never in a position where he's kind of cornered and doing stuff he doesn't want to do. He's not a weak man. He's a very, very, very strong man, but very kind and very loving at the same time. Just absolutely perfect. Well, we'll move on to the next section, because that is really, I mean, that's it. It's that simple. The wedding in Cana where he turns water into wine. That's the whole point of it. Now, the next section has to do with Jesus cleansing the temple. If you were with us 4 years ago in the book of Luke, you might be saying, oh yeah, I remember when Jesus cleansed the temple and he drove out the money changers and he overturned all of those things and let the animals go. Here's the thing though. If you remember the book of Luke, that happens in like chapter 19 of Luke. So we're talking about right before his crucifixion. Right now, we're in chapter 2 of John, and we're reading this story. So liberal theologians and commentators will immediately say, for some reason, John put this story at the beginning, and the other authors, for some reason, put it at the end. And then they kind of leave you hanging with this thought of, oh, maybe the Bible isn't actually true. And oh, maybe John made a mistake. And oh, I wonder what that's all about. And that's what it's intended to do when people say things like that. I want you to know beyond the shadow of a doubt that this is not a mistake. This is not a discrepancy. Jesus does this twice. He does it at the beginning of his ministry. He does it again at the end of his ministry. And at the end of this Bible study, we're going to go through something regarding that will blow your mind. It blew my mind so bad.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't even take notes on it for like a day and a half. It just had to simmer in my brain until I could kind of piece things together.
Yeah. And John wrote this gospel last, so he knew it was left out, and he knew it was this important to put it in there. Yeah.
So good. Yes, I hadn't even thought about
Yeah,
that. That's
right?
really, really good. Thank you so much. All right, so let's get into this next passage. So if you have your Bibles, Legacy Standard Bible is what I'm reading from, but any version will do. Chapter 2, verses 12 to 17. Here it comes. After this, he went down to Capernaum, he and his mother and his brothers and his disciples, and they stayed there a few days. And the Passover of the Jews was near, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. And he found in the temple those who were selling oxen and sheep and doves and money changers seated at their tables. And he made a scourge of cords. This would have been like what the animals had been tethered to. So big, big cords. And drove them all out of the temple with the sheep and the oxen. And he poured out the coins of the money changers and overturned the tables. Are you getting the picture? Can you see this going on? This is a total takedown. I mean, this is unbelievable. This makes Chuck Norris jealous. This is amazing. And to those who were selling the doves, he said, take these things away. Stop making my Father's house a place of business. His disciples remembered that it was written, zeal for your house will consume me, a prophetic fulfillment. So talk to us, if you would, Emily, a little bit about this time period and what's taking place here. Why are people in the temple and why are they selling stuff?
Right. So I think the timing is really important here. This is during the Passover celebration, and this was the celebration of God's deliverance of the Jewish people out of 400 years of complete oppression.
Yeah.
So he brings them out of slavery, under the Egyptian slavery, and he brings them to Jerusalem to build a temple so that they can worship their one true God. And, you know, what could go wrong? They have freedom and they have their temple to worship. And they also have the temple to bring their sacrifices to, which is an atonement for sin, a placeholder for the atonement of sin. So how great is that?
Right.
Well, as we, as humans, as things go, enter the Sadducees. And the Sadducees were the religious authorities that were overseeing the building of the temple as well as the sacrifices. So there was a couple things at play to set the stage. So the temple itself, it was in the 65th year that it was 63, 65 years it was being built, or
I don't
46.
even
I'm
know.
sorry, I think it was 46. It was in the
okay.
46th year of being built. So you could imagine this temple was not a dirt floor. It was not minimal. It was not humble. It was supposed to be made to worship God, and it was becoming a worship of the structure. It had to be opulent and beautiful. It was at this point 46 years in the making. So to pay for that, they implemented a temple tax. So people from surrounding areas that wanted to worship at the temple would have to come and pay the temple tax, because the Sadducees wanted it to be this grand building. And also the Sadducees, because they became the religious authorities of the time, they began to get prideful. I left this out a little bit. They began to get prideful and self-righteous, and that's why they began to step into a role of authority that almost kind of replaced God rather than worship and honor God. So the people would bring their temple tax, and the currency of the day were Roman coins that had Caesar on them. So the Sadducees, who were playing this role of God, said, well, you can't bring a Roman coin in here because it has the picture of Caesar, and that's idolatry. So what we can do is we can help you, right? So they would take these coins that were real money and could be spent anywhere, and they would replace them, kind of do an exchange for their fake currency of the temple that really wasn't good anywhere. It really wasn't really a monetary system. And of course, they charged a great big margin on this. So they began just to extort these people that were paying this tax. So that was one thing that was at play. But I think also with the oxen and the sheep, and the English Standard Version said pigeons, and this one said doves, which was kind of interesting. But
Yeah.
this was a place to come and sacrifice, and I think this is so important because the sacrifice, God wanted the sacrifice to be meaningful. He wanted it to be the first of fruit, the best fruit, as blemish free as it could be, to be a sacrifice. And I, as a new beginner, kind of struggled with that. Like, why does it have to have those standards, right? But when you think about it, and I thought about this a lot, that's what we call in our society punitive damages. When you do something wrong and the court system says you have to pay for them, right? The punitive damage for that can't be so small that you don't feel it. You have to feel it. If you do something wrong as a pharmaceutical company and you're found guilty, you don't pay out $1 or $2, you pay out big.
Massive, right?
So, and that's the cost. So that was the placeholder for sin. So these people were bringing their very best animals to be sacrificed, and the Sadducees did the same thing. They said, that's just not good enough for God. So they said, we can't accept your sacrifices, but what we can do is sell you ones that are appropriate, right? So they would take their sacrifices and then resell them sacrifices, the sheep and the oxen, that were supposedly too standard, and they would also charge a great big margin on these as well. And I know my common sense says they're probably taking their blemished ones and bringing them
Wonder
around
where those all
back and
went.
resold them, right?
Yeah.
But they were extorting the people. And I think this is why, to me, this was intended to be Jesus's first mission rather than the wedding where he did it, as a favor. He was furious. This was not okay.
Yeah.
And I thought it was interesting too that he took the time. He was going to cleanse the temple. He was going to get rid of this in God's house. And he took the time to make, and the Bible, I love that the Bible tells us what the weapon is, because it tells you that he was premeditated. He made that, right? So he probably wove the shaft or attached these leather cords to a shaft, which to me, as a new beginner, can I get right into this?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
As a new believer, I was so confused that Jesus went in with fury. Now, Jesus could have brought down fire from heaven and he could have killed them all and wiped them all out. He didn't. He ran them out. He turned, he emptied the money and he ran them out of there with the whip. So it was, he was getting rid of everything. But I was curious why he came with fury. If he took the time to make the weapon and he had that time, why wasn't he thinking as a loving God and as a forgiving God? That was a kind of a discrepancy for me. Can we ask that as a question?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah. Do that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what do you think, everybody? Why did he come? You can just start typing your answer right now, especially if you're live.
Uh-huh.
Why do you think that Jesus came in with such anger instead of like corralling everybody and saying, guys, this is not right. Let's work on this,
Mhm.
the quintessential loving Jesus that most of us have come to know and love. And if you're a part of many churches, that's the only Jesus that you will ever hear about. This is not a story that will be probably talked about very much. So in answer to that, Mary says that he wanted to make a statement. That's why he came in anger. That's excellent. Susie had commented prior to us asking this. He says, it sounds like it was all about the money
Mhm.
more than the sacrifice.
Mhm.
Bingo. The Sadducees didn't believe in an afterlife. They didn't believe in resurrection. They figured when you died, you were just done. You were
Mhm.
gone. And when that's your worldview, then you don't really have any compelling reason to control yourself on this side of it because you just want to get all you can. I mean, this is it, right? You live once and then you're done.
Yeah.
There's no judgment. And so they were about as evil as could be. So anybody else want to venture a guess or a thought as to why it was that Jesus came in with such fury and wasn't as maybe as loving as we often think of him as being?
Mhm.
See if anybody else has a comment there. It's real quiet. That's okay.
This is the delay, right?
It's well, yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
We'll see.
So-
Did you want to
Yeah, and
answer that?
thinking about it, I had learned of Jesus as a lamb, as the love and the tenderness and being a lamb. And here he is coming in like a lion. And Jesus is a lamb when he's with us. And Jesus is a lion when he's fighting for us. And that's what he was doing by cleansing the temple. He was fighting for us.
Exactly. And don't forget too that the tabernacle and the temple, which came after it was the permanent structure, was a picture of Jesus. So Jesus walks into this thing that is he is the sacrificial lamb. He is the access to God, and he walks into this absolutely satanic, corrupt situation, and he has righteous indignation over this. And rather than being mamby-pamby about it, he goes after it. But what I'd love to do is end up tonight by talking about why it is that he did that. We have a couple more comments here, so let's just bring these up. Lori says he meant business.
Sure did.
Boy, did he ever. Roberta said because they were robbing people by charging a lot more, and this made him mad that they were taking advantage.
Yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Those are great comments. So in addition to everything that we just said, it's all good, it's all right. There's even more. Jesus didn't just fulfill the law. He was the fulfillment of the law. I know that sounds like I just said the same thing twice, but it's actually a little bit different too. When he fulfilled the law, he did things that had been prophesied and he completed those things. But he was in the embodiment of so much, which was in the Old Testament, that if you kind of know, you look at the New Testament and you go, oh my goodness, I missed that. I didn't even know that he was doing this. And that's one of those experiences that you're about to have. So hang in here with me for just a minute. We'll end with this. In Matthew 5:17, Jesus said, "Do not think that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. I did not come to abolish, but to fulfill." So here's the thing. In Leviticus chapter 14, and I'm not going to read it, but if you want to, it's Leviticus, I'll pop this up, 14, 33 to 53. So way back in the Old Testament, this is the law and all kinds of ceremonial things that they had to do. This is what would take place. So we all have heard of people, and I hope you're not one of them, but I have multiple friends who have had this experience where they suddenly start to feel really ill, and they often end up going to the doctor, and they go for tests, and they have MRIs, and they can never figure out what it is. And then for one reason or another, they start pulling drywall off their bathroom wall, and behind the drywall is black mold, and it is toxic and it is deadly, and all of a sudden, like, everything goes into motion. They got to get out of the house until they can get this remediated. In the Old Testament, there were times like that where something would start to compromise a person's house. We could say maybe corrupt it. I believe in Leviticus they call it leprosy, but just understand that leprosy was this really, really vast general term. It could apply to any number of skin conditions and even to housing conditions like the black mold thing. They might just call it leprosy. It was just a corruption, a blight, we might call it. So when that happened, somebody say they come into their house, they would make them with stones and sometimes smear some plaster over it. And they would see something on the wall that wasn't supposed to be there and not a good thing. It was the responsibility of the owner of the house to go get the high priest to come and take a look and verify that something was off. So hang with me now. So God the Father, Jesus says, "My Father's house." This is God's house. God the Father sends Jesus, who is our high priest, into his house to take a look and verify that something is way, way, way off here. Something is a blight on his house. Are you picking this up? Are you catching this? So Jesus does this. He becomes the fulfillment of this picture in the Old Testament that they didn't even understand exactly why they were doing all of these things. But God in his foreknowledge knew that someday Jesus was going to come in and actually be part of this process. So the high priest would take a look at it, and then he would come back very shortly after and see if it was getting worse. Well, this wasn't Jesus's first time in the temple. He would go every year to the temple. So he had been observing this type of thing going on for quite some time. And he could see, presumably, that it was not getting better. It was probably getting worse every single time. So here he is as the high priest. He's discovered a problem. He's backed off. He's gone back. The problem is still persistent, and it's getting worse. So then the next thing that they would do is they would take the stones that were infected off of the wall, tear down the plaster, and they would cast it out. So they would take the blight out of the house. And that was the job of the high priest to oversee. Are you seeing what's going on here? Jesus goes into the temple. He observes the blight. He knows it's getting worse. And he takes the blight, those stones, if you will, the religious leaders, the vendors, the people that are doing this, and he casts them out. He does exactly what Leviticus is talking about. But that's not all. And this is why this is so important. And when we see something that I started with tonight, where I said, where some people will look and go, "Oh, weird, John put the story at the beginning and others put it at the end. Maybe the Bible's not true." No, there's so much that you're missing. That's what happens at the beginning. That's where this story stops. Jesus has taken the blight and cast it out of the temple. But if you go back to Leviticus, you will find out that after a period of time, the high priest comes back into the house and he looks around to see what's going on. And if the blight is back and spreading and getting worse, the whole thing has to be demolished. He's got to take every stone down. They take it all.
Sorry. It just takes my breath away.
It gives me massive goosebumps here.
Mm-hmm.
So when Jesus in Luke 19:44 right before he goes back into the temple, knowing full well what he is about to do, this is his words. He says, "And they will level you to the ground and your children within you, and they will not leave in you one stone upon another, because you did not recognize the time of your visitation." What happens in 70 AD is that the whole thing comes down. Jesus cast them out again, but pronounces this destruction, total destruction upon them. And when it happens in 70 AD, when the Romans come in and they literally take every single stone off of the others, there is nothing left intact. The Sadducees are demolished, and they have never, ever come back again. And that is why you have the first temple cleansing and the last temple cleansing, because not only was that important to preserve the integrity of the worship, which had been so utterly compromised, and you did an amazing job describing that for us, but in addition to fulfilling prophecy, Jesus was the fulfillment of the Old Testament. And if you study it and you start to put it together, when you read the New Testament, it's like this mind-blowing.
It's mind-blowing. It's absolutely mind-blowing.
Yes.
Yeah. And Susie asked a question. She said, how could they prove these animals were worthy of sacrifice? That's the point, Susie. There was no proof. It was their bat, their ball. Everyone who came with a sacrifice was told the same story. And I actually read that people stopped bringing sacrifices.
I did too.
Yep. And they're
They
like,
gave up.
I'll just buy it there.
Yeah.
Because that's ultimately
What's
what
the
happened.
point?
Which Sadducees probably didn't like, because then how would they refill their stock of resellable items? It's like, if you ever, buy something from, an online retailer and you get it and you're like, this was a return.
Yeah, I think we've all had that happen. Great.
Yeah.
I
Great
gave
question,
full
Susie.
price
Thank
for
you.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there were certain standards. Obviously, if the lamb had some kind of blemish on it that was observable, it was not
Mhm.
worthy of being sacrificed. But what the religious leaders were doing is taking perfectly good lambs and declaring them unclean, not worthy, with no explanation. And if they took your lamb, then you didn't have a lamb, you had to buy one.
Probably where cash cow came from.
Maybe, I don't know if that's where that came from or not. Yeah. So anyway, so that is John chapter 2. So that's where we're going to end up tonight. But I thought I would ask Emily to just kind of like lead us out by just sharing a little bit about well, I guess you kind of already did that, didn't you? Like how before you knew Christ, how difficult this was to understand.
It was so difficult because there's nothing linear to me about the Bible. That things start fitting together when you have those 63,000 hyperlinks where the Bible self-references.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to understand, and for me, even understanding the Gospel of John, it's really important to know that he had the first 3 Gospels, and he knew that we would never know. We would never know that there were 2 cleansings.
No.
We would never know that without John. So I guess the point is, it's the study. It's and this is why it's for me, it's the daily bread. It's not only the fulfillment of God in my life, and it fills me, but I need to understand there's so much to it. And it's so easy, I think, to get wrong. Even though some of the messages are so simple, it's still very easy to get things wrong if you don't have leadership that leads you correctly and is so scrupulous as you are.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. I love it. And we know we have a lot of you who follow us out there. We're so grateful that you do hang out with us on Monday nights, and we love going through the Word of God with you. I hope this has blessed you as much as it has blessed the 2 of us. We talked for the longest time today, just marveling at the power of the Word of God and the intricacy of it, and the veracity of it, and the applications for our lives
Mhm.
that are just so very life changing. So thank you so much for being with us tonight
you.
for Bible Study Hub. We hope that you will join us again next Monday night at 9 p.m. Eastern here on our Facebook page,
Thanks,
or you
Susie.
can go to YouTube.
you.
Our Bible Study Hub is on YouTube for Bible Study Hub. It's the same address there, so you can find us easily. And then if you want to catch up on anything, that's a good way to do it because everything is more organized.
Thank you all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll see you
Thank
again
you.
next Monday
Thank
night,
you,
hopefully.
ladies.